We will now begin the webinar. Thank you for attending this webinar, The Next Generation of Incident Response Intelligent Orchestration. We are honored to be joined today by experts from IBM and Optiv. Ted Julian is the VP of Product Management and co-founder of IBM Resilient. Over the last 12 years, he has conceived and launched multiple successful security startups across software, hardware, and professional services. Ted is a sought-after industry expert who has appeared on CNN and ABC News, as well as in the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. Also joining us is Jeff Wichman and Curtis Fechner of Optiv. Jeff is a practice director for Optiv's Enterprise Incident Management team. Jeff's role is to provide leadership to the Enterprise Incident Management security consultants and technical expertise in digital forensics and incident response programs and processes. Curtis Fechner is a senior security consultant in Optiv's Enterprise Incident Management practice. Curtis's role is to assist Optiv's clients in proactively assessing, developing, and maturing their incident response and incident management programs. We look forward to covering the following topics today. To get things started, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Everyone, taking a step back and looking at the evolution of information security over the past 20 years, a lot has changed. 15 years ago, incident response and digital forensics only really happened for large corporations and government agencies. 10 years ago, incident response began to take hold inside organizations on a more of an ad hoc basis. And what I mean here is incident response was happening, but we rarely ever talked about it in the public sector. And then 5 years ago, the target breach forced a fundamental mind shift in the full life cycle of incident response. The public really became aware of what a data breach was, and at that time, how much it really directly impacted them. Since then, news of data breaches has only increased. State attorney generals want to know when a loss of data has occurred. Executives and boards of directors want to know more about our security controls and our incident response processes. And most recently, CEOs are being publicly questioned during congressional hearings. Incident response really is center stage now. There is a public outcry whenever a breach occurs through armchair quarterbacks via Twitter and Facebook regarding all aspects of an investigation. The history of data breaches being swept under the rug are gone. There is GDPR and numerous, sometimes conflicting state notification requirements for any type of data loss that impacts an individual. Our time window to respond to an incident continues to shrink. Change is our only constant. This applies to incident response more than ever. As the time limits for notification requirements continues to shrink, the ability for organizations to respond quickly and effectively are more important than ever. Incident response must continue to evolve through automation and orchestration. This will enable our human-based assets more time to properly define, plan, build, and deploy more robust sets of security controls, and when necessary, perform more in-depth threat hunting within an environment. Within Optiv's Enterprise Incident Management team, we are all continually looking at the evolution of incident response to improve efficiencies. The integration of automation, orchestration, and SIM solutions can go a long way in reducing the dwell time of an attacker.
Thanks, Jeff. So, as Jeff said, we're continually looking at the evolution of incident response and identifying areas where we can improve efficiency. We continue to work with organizations who are tired of operating off of the back foot and merely playing that reactive response game and want to move into a more proactive incident management posture. A significant amount of energy in our field has been dedicated over the last few years to the notion of cyber threat intelligence. Even smaller organizations with limited budgets are really interested in CTI. The problem that we have seen is that these initiatives result in the presumption that CTI is just as simple as ingesting a few data feeds from a vendor. And yeah, that's helpful, but it's only really scratching the surface. These technical intelligence feeds are often just collections of file hashes, IP addresses, URLs, and domain host names. And they're an excellent resource for augmenting the security team's detection capabilities via their SIM. And it's great to be able to build alert rules that leverage that data for correlation. The challenge is that there is a lack of context with that data. you don't entirely know what you're detecting or how it relates to a potential incident. Further, sometimes legitimate files or addresses are included in these feeds. It's not entirely uncommon for a piece of malware to reach out to Microsoft Update, for example, just to verify that there's an available internet connection before it deploys its payload. Similarly, sometimes you'll see the MD5 for a tool like psexec.exe that your own system administrators might be using internally, and that'll come up on a feed as well because an adversary was using it in a completely unrelated campaign somewhere halfway around the world. So, to that end, what we've helped our clients try to understand is that there's more to CTI than just these feeds. There's a whole world of strategic, operational, and tactical intelligence. These kinds of intelligence are where researchers, government agencies, and security vendors document things and get into some real depth and break down how attackers are operating, what tools and techniques are in use, and they really contextualize that data to have relevance to particular organizations within a given industrial vertical. Having the ability to internally interpret and enrich these intelligence feeds within your own organization and take those higher level reports and analyses is absolutely critical. And so we want to ensure that our intelligence capabilities are serving as a central hub for the rest of the security team. As security programs mature and grow, we strive to add structure and capabilities to our program, a formal SOC with continuous network security monitoring, a formal IR team who leverage repeatable processes, and a threat hunting team that's charged with seeking out indicators of unknown threats lurking inside the network that aren't being detected. And of course, there's always the evergreen presence of our leadership teams who are obligated to represent the value of the security program to the rest of the business and interface with business leaders. At the center of this, we do see our CTI team, which provides services to all of these teams and functions to support them. So with leadership, at the most basic, the security program's leadership really presents requests for intelligence and information that come out of the business side of the company, and they bring those to the CTI team. And then there's also that notion of architectural and strategic planning for the security team itself. So they want to be able to make sure that those plans are aligning with the trends that the CTI team is seeing among threat actors and emerging threats. So if a company is looking to buy some new security controls, for example, the CTI team can help you understand what the most likely threats are and how they're operating. From there, it's easier to assess whether or not a particular controller solution is appropriate or if there's other functions that are required to address that current threat. Another common use is like if the CISO is contacted and somebody asks her what risk is posed to the organization by a threat actor they saw on the news, or the risk posed to the organization by a newly disclosed vulnerability, the CISO should be able to ask her CTI team to provide that information and intelligence in a succinct report that actually addresses common questions and concerns. And this is something we really want to formalize with processes, RFI processes, for example, to make sure we're being specific with answers to the questions that we're being asked so that we can really tell a story. We want to track these requests as well, and we want to make sure that we're really getting value out of our CTI team. Now, from the perspective of network security monitoring, this is your traditional sort of SOC role. When we think of a SOC, we think of security analysts looking at panes of glass. So a reliable SIM solution makes a huge difference in enabling these security teams to centralize their day-to-day operations and limit those numbers of panes of glass that they're really monitoring. We use these systems to monitor for known threats, but we also know that these teams should be improving their detection capabilities internally. So to that end, we need to think about what the network security monitoring team is solving for with their alert rules. Are they looking for patterns of intrusion that were informed through a framework like MITRE's ATT&CK? Or are we looking on a basic collection of failed login pattern rules that are built into the vendor's default settings? So the data being ingested in the SIM makes a significant difference. We use CTI to help assess what we ingest and whether or not it's adequate for identifying an intrusion in the network environment. If the right data isn't there, the CTI team can then work with the network security monitoring team and security architects and even network operations teams to see what can be done to improve the data that's being brought in internally. Further, this is also where those CTI feeds, those technical data feeds, really do come into play and shine, because your CTI team then, if it's internal, can vet that content and make sure that it's actually relevant and that it's usable and that it's not going to create false positives. Being able to alert on an emerging threat from a trusted vendor is great using their own feeds, but we have to watch for false positives. There's something else to consider as well. The CTI team can take a non-technical report and break it down into a bunch of technical indicators that actually do work with the SIM. Now, Another notion that we're getting into here is threat hunting. So threat hunting is a discipline that's been around for some time now, but it's mostly been discussed among hands-on security practitioners, incident responders, folks who are the boots on the ground in the incident response space. So there's more awareness that's grown over the last couple of years, though, and now we see threat hunting turning into a buzzword, and we see a lot more inquiries about threat hunting from security leadership as well. So whereas your traditional controls like antivirus are focused on previously known threats and are pretty dependent on signatures, hunts are built off of a scientific method. So hunters start with a hypothesis, what are we looking for, and then build and execute a specific plan to look for that activity. And the CTI team is wonderful here because the Intel team can work hand in hand with your hunters and develop these hypotheses and test them, and then also make refinements if needed. If you're running on a hunt framework that was based on an APT group that used a certain methodology for a long time, and that APT group's tactics changed, the Intel team can be aware of that, and they can help refine that hunt to make sure they're continuing to address it and they're not running on an old hunt hypothesis that is no longer relevant. Bringing it all back together, we have incident response. At some point, a threat hunter is going to find something, or the network security monitoring team is going to catch an alert in the SIM that requires a well-orchestrated response effort. While we want to automate easier event resolutions, sometimes you really need hands-on methods. And this is where we dig into the valley of security orchestration and automation. You're cutting out the low-hanging fruit with the automation, but on the orchestration side as well, there's a lot of moving parts. The IR team needs to document and track their response with detailed notes and information. These notes are leveraged by the CTI team to help the network security monitoring team improve their alerts on their side of the house, as well as just for general tracking of adversaries. And then these notes also show proof of value exhibited by the hunt team as well if that incident was discovered through threat hunting. And of course, there's just the general obligation we tend to face for having to produce a formal incident report to satisfy a lot of regulatory requirements. And sometimes a good report is just an internal ask in the business. But more than anything, from an incident response perspective, it's just good housekeeping and good practice to be consistent and to take good notes and make sure that we're following repeatable workflows. So we want to take all these moving parts and ensure that we're moving the same direction and we're engaging in proper feedback loops within the teams. We frequently see challenges with incident response when organizations do not plan or prepare adequately. Poor quality IR plans create havoc at a higher strategic level, while a lack of runbooks really impairs the IR team's ability to respond in a consistent manner. Building these plans and playbooks out is important, but it becomes even better when we can centralize and automate these resources with the platform and genuinely take our weight off of that back foot and get proactive with our operation.
Thank you so much, Curtis. We are really excited to be partnered with IBM and have Ted here from Resilient. Ted, I'll now hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So, of course, what makes all of this even more complicated is the current environment that we all operate in. There are some well-understood challenges. I'm sure they're very familiar to all of you. From the skill shortage, I mean, none of us can, if we find enough people, we struggle to keep them. There just aren't enough skilled professionals, especially in incident response out there, to fill all the slots that we have across our teams. We also are experiencing, most of us, more attacks than ever before. This leads to not only alert fatigue in our teams, but also the potential for things to slip through the cracks because we just can't get through to all of them. As Curtis and Jeff talked about, we have a very complex and getting more complex regulatory environment, with GDPR being the big news this year, of course. And then finally, our SOC environments aren't getting any simpler. There's just a growing array of tools and technologies in there that we have to work with to try to solve these problems that we're talking about today. So a set of technologies have emerged to try to help organizations tackle these challenges. Gartner refers to these as the SOAR market, the Security Orchestration and Automation and Response set of technologies. And it's made up of three components. The first is, of course, security orchestration and automation, a set of technologies that ties various point products together and tries to help them solve problems like incident response. The second is security incident response platforms. You can view these as case management systems, but specific for IR. And then finally, threat intelligence platforms. Curtis talked about threat intelligence quite a bit, and there's a set of technologies out there to to try to solve problems for those kinds of customers. And the SOAR stack from Gartner is what ties all of this together. Resilient pulls all this together based on the notion of intelligent orchestration. Intelligent orchestration being the glue that combines these three different categories together, fuses them together into a cohesive platform to solve these problems for customers. Specifically, it automates and accelerates the incident response process by fusing not only cyber intelligence or digital intelligence, but also human intelligence, since that clearly is just as critical to being able to process incidents effectively. We do this based on a platform that we're very flattered is broadly deployed across the globe as part of one of the largest enterprise security companies out there, IBM. And we're fairly unique in our marketplace in being able to offer significant capabilities in all three segments of the SOAR stack based on our intelligent orchestration set of technologies. What these do for our customers is help them orchestrate and automate their SOC. So you can see on the right a graphic that shows the notion of a platform like Resilient being able to pull together all of these related systems, some of them security specific. They might be detection controls, enrichment controls, mitigation controls. Others could be general purpose systems like CMDBs that have valuable context about the systems you might be trying to investigate or trying to protect. And platforms like Resilient can pull all of these things together, can orchestrate and automate among them to solve incident response problems. And the value that we've seen this provide to customers is this notion of a guided response, where the system is putting the right information in front of the right person at exactly the right time to help them make an intelligent decision. It can improve visibility substantially, and in our case, since we incorporate privacy breach regulations in our guidance as well, we can address those aspects and yield better compliance for our customers. This is of particular interest typically to people who have a SIM like QRadar, because after all, something like a SIM goes through enormous effort to sift through the noise and turn it into signal, right? Take that million alerts that you might get a day and turn that into some smaller number of actionable offenses. And ultimately, once the team works through those, your conclusions only matter if you do something about them. And that's where the SOAR stack technologies like our product can step in to help you ultimately take action, as you can see here. And this is ideally a continuous loop where these systems are bidirectionally connected so that they're able to benefit from what you're learning on both sides of the equation. In our case, we view automation as one component of intelligent orchestration, and this is the same way that Gartner sort of views these concepts within this realm, where automation is used to automate the things that can be automated. And in our experience with customers, this is very often enrichment activities, where as opposed to having somebody go through a set of steps manually, or even with a single click of a button, if it can be automated to just give them all of the information they might need immediately, all the better. And over time, we see customers apply automation more broadly for other aspects of the incident response process, but it certainly starts there. And that having done that, you now are applying the humans in the loop with that critical information, that critical context, this notion of a guided response. And this view of intelligent orchestration, as you can see, spans not just technology, but also people and process. Since after all, being able to codify your process, as Curtis was referring to earlier, is critically important. And so if that can be part of this guided response, where based on how something's happened before, these are the standard operating procedures we need to follow now. It includes contacting legal, whatever it might be. Having those within scope of what you're doing is going to maximize your benefits here. So we do this based on the Resilient platform, obviously, and you can see here for your information in case this is something you care to learn more about, the three primary modules that make up our product across security, action, and the privacy module, which brings in the regs, as I mentioned earlier. So the other important component of all of this is orchestration and automation is only sort of important, or its ability to provide value is related to the number of integrations that are available. And so we've invested heavily over the past year or so to create enterprise-grade bidirectional applications that are available via the IBM Security App Exchange. Many of you may already be familiar with this because you're QRadar customers, for example, and there are an enormous number of QRadar add-ons and extensions and so forth available there. But there's a Resilient channel within the App Exchange as well, with a large and aggressively growing number of integrations that you can browse through and then add to your Resilient instance. And this was built upon a big investment we made to develop the developer tools, a portal, and community, and kind of all of the rest to help drive this this aspect of ARM. And what this means is you have this concept of dynamic incident management, with sort of our case management capabilities, fused with our intelligent orchestration engine that I've been speaking about, and this growing number of apps and functions. And here you can see some examples of key partners of ours across identification and enrichment, escalation, containment response and recovery, as well as communication and coordination. So if we think about that hub and spoke that I had earlier a few slides ago, these are some of the logos that populate that hub and spoke, sort of a partial list of some of our key partners. And this is growing week by week based on the investments that we've been making and the aggressive outreach that we've been doing with the third party. Since our goal, obviously, for customers is to be able to integrate with whatever you want to integrate with. And naturally, sometimes that's within the IBM portfolio. And often it's not, and it doesn't matter. And in any case, if it's something that you need to integrate with relative to incident response, we need to make sure we support it with Resilient. Ultimately, the benefits, as we've all been alluding to, can be quite substantial, and so I thought I would share with you a case study here from one of our customers. And as you look through the details, you can see here, it sort of starts with the identification of the incident, but then it moves through to enrichment via things like Carbon Black, through incident tracking, audit logging, things of this nature. But in the end, they were able to take something that used to chew up about an hour and a half of time of their staff down to about 1 minute for this task. So this is just one detailed example of a combination of orchestration and automation applied to a specific use case. And what's thrilling is to watch customers, tee up a few of these early on, and then based on the success and the benefits that they've yielded the organization, they then go on and they move to address others. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for inviting me. I hope this has been a valuable investment of your time, and open it up